Welcome, everyone, to the Outpost Unknown spoiler review of Pearl. Joining me tonight is my co-host on the Once More for Safety show, Josh.
Here, present.
Jeez, you just bungle everything.
It's so fucking late. I'm so goddamn tired right now.
And first time appearing on the Outpost Unknown channel for a review is Jenny.
Hey guys, what's up?
Now, you guys can all see an interview with Jenny that Josh and I did on the Once More for Safety show, where she talks all about being a local actor here in Nebraska and working with Josh on Pigface 2. So definitely check that out if you're interested. If Jenny doesn't enrage you with what she says about Pearl tonight, be sure to check out her interview. A little bit of backstory, we all sort of braved the sweltering Nebraska weather to check out Pearl. This was directed by Ty West, co-written by Ty West and Mia Goth, and stars Mia Goth as the titular Pearl. It's a prequel to X, which came out earlier this year. And again, if you're interested, plug. In hearing Josh and I's review of that film, you can also find that on Outpost Unknown under the Transmissions from the Outpost playlist. You can find that there. So I'm going to throw it to Josh. Josh, can you give us you're very tired. Can you give us a high-level synopsis? Like, what is Pearl all about? Basic story.
It's almost like a backstory of, like, why Pearl is the way she is, I guess, in X. I don't really know how to explain it, but it's basically, like, about a character named Pearl that,
God, you're failing. Jenny, can you tell us what is the basic plot of the movie Pearl?
So I have to also mention I have not seen X, but I get the gist kind of what it's about, and I'm looking forward to seeing it. So Pearl for me was more, I think it was 1816 or
1918.
1918, yeah.
1918. Sorry, I'm really bad with numbers. If you can't help it.
Takes place during the War of 1812.
Yeah. So the gist I would give to kind of wrap it up would say it's a story of a girl on a farm. She's a daughter of immigrants. Her family's also got horrible, failing health. She feels incredibly trapped on this farm. Her husband's away, obviously fighting in the war, which seems to be like what everyone's doing at the time. And she, to kind of get more into her character, she to me is like the Disney princess of horror because she's got all this like singing and animals love her, and it was like a Disney princess kind of vibe at the beginning.
Yeah, she has dreams of being in the movie pictures, right?
I nailed this son of a bitch of a synopsis. The backstory on how Pearl became the person she was. That's basically what I fucking said.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Yes. So basically, yeah, it's Pearl's sort of backstory. In other words, right, Josh?
I literally used the word backstory. Jesus
okay. So Josh, I know you'll probably have thoughts on this because I know you are a big fan of X. So I'll hold off on asking you what your thoughts were. But Jenny, tell me what you thought of Pearl.
So I really liked it. That was actually my first time seeing Mia Goth as an actress. I like the depth that she gives the character. It's almost like complete opposite people she's playing in one movie. Maybe even more characters than that, because she seems like this really great daughter taking care of her father and dealing with her mother, who's obviously under an incredible amount of stress and depression. And then there's also the side of her that, kind of gave me that unsettling, unhinged, crazy vibe that, grows more and more as we get to know who Pearl is and what she's going through and, just how long she's been stuck in this like unfulfilling life and has these big dreams. So I really liked the character. And just kind of how we very slowly get to kind of figure out what Pearl is all about, what she's going through, and kind of what her secrets are.
I have seen X, and one of the big problems I had with that film was, and I think I said this in our review, Josh, is that the end of the movie, you're kind of like, there's questions here I don't understand. Like, they don't really describe what's really going on. I won't spoil it for you, Jenny, what happens in X, but there's a point towards the end where you're just kind of like, what is happening here, and why is this happening? And this movie sort of gave me that backstory. Mia Goth was fucking amazing, and so like I love sort of seeing her descent into just a complete psychotic break, and I really loved the music. It has that really classical Hollywood score to it. You don't really get it's not a traditional horror score. It's not like the score that was on X. This looks like a Technicolor, 1940s film, or like a Wizard of Oz sort of thing, where everything's bright and vibrant and the colors. It's very Douglas Sirkian. If any of you guys have seen like All That Heaven Allows, and many Douglas Sirk films utilize the mirrors and stuff, where you can kind of see like the camera's behind her, but then you're seeing various reflections of her face, sort of showing the fractured personality that's within her. You get to see that kind of stuff in here. So I was really impressed with how Ty West directed this and really made it feel like an old school classical Hollywood movie. But man, Mia Goth's performance basically carried the film for me, because every time she's on screen, just these like little subtle like looks and movements, and she goes from like complete quiet, shy, sort of timid mouse to screaming in rage and murdering people. And that last scene, like the last shot of the movie, goes on for like 4 or 5 minutes, and it's just her smiling crazily into the camera as she's like prying her eyes out. I thought it was fantastic, and I've had a couple days to sit on it, because when we came out of the theater, we were all kind of chatting like, "Oh, what do we think? What do we think?" And with movies like this, I think it's best to sort of like sleep on them a little bit and just sort of like let them percolate in your mind. I think I like this movie better than X. To be honest, I think I like it better than X. And Josh, I know you mentioned that right after we got out of the theater, like, oh, I felt like X just moves quicker, moves a lot quicker. I think I might disagree with that, because if I remember correctly, it's a long time before anyone dies in X. Like, it's a long time. It's all sitting with these characters and getting to know them, and then it's at the end of that movie when everything really starts going crazy. So I think both X and Pearl are similarly constructed in that way, and yet completely different. This one is focused primarily on Pearl, whereas X is focused primarily, like Mia Goth plays Maxine in that, but it's more of an ensemble piece in that. But I love this movie. It gets better as I sit with it. Josh, you've had a couple days to think about Pearl. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think when I even before we got out of the theater, I was like, you could really tell that Mia Goth's voice was very much a part of this writing process.
Yeah.
It was just different the way it was told, versus X, where Ty West wrote that by himself and Mia Goth jumped in and was co-writer on this. You could really like tell that she put a lot of her voice into Pearl. And so I wonder,
what do you mean by that? Like, what do you mean by her voice?
I just feel like, when she sat down and delivered that monologue at the table, for me, Mia Goth wrote that. Like, I just don't see Ty West writing that.
Okay.
It just sounded like a different voice writing that than what we got in X. And I know the character's different, but it's just like I felt like Mia Goth had a big part of writing Pearl's character. I just felt that monologue had a lot of Mia Goth's voice in it, and then it just felt like it was written differently than the voice that was written in X. And I know
Gotcha.
the characters are different, but you could just tell that Mia Goth really put a lot of herself into that Pearl character. I felt like she wrote that character. I could be wrong, but that's just kind of what it felt like to me.
Okay.
You talked about when I was talking about how the speed of the movie, X just like I know it took a while for like a kill to come around for X, but those characters just felt like they made that movie move faster, and I was really like into those characters, and what they were going out to do, I guess.
Oh, you
And
were interested in the porn aspect.
that's a big part of it for me. Um, but the first 30 minutes of Pearl just seemed like it took a really long time to kind of get going. And I said I know she, did some horrible shit at the beginning, but it just seemed like the burn really slow, and I kept waiting for shit to happen. The real difference for me too was Mia Goth really shared a lot of the screen in X, and she jumped way forward and stood out on her own a lot for Pearl.
Yeah.
I know she shared the screen with the characters of her mom and dad and the projectionists and stuff, but was like she was the real person that stood like she was very much shared the screen in X, and she very much stood out in Pearl to me.
Okay.
It was really funny that you mentioned the Wizard of Oz, because somebody was talking about that scarecrow scene,
Yeah.
and how it very much kind of mimicked, like, it was very Wizard of Oz esque, minus the fucking of the scarecrow. Um,
You mean Dorothy doesn't do that in the original?
not that I remember, but she could have.
That's off camera. That's off camera.
Yeah, it's off camera. But
Okay.
I loved Pearl. I really did. The only reason I would direct somebody to X first, um, is just because that just moved faster for me. But if you want to watch them really in order and kind of see, uh, Mia Goth kind of grow into her character, watch Pearl first.
Jenny, I'm going to ask you because you're an actress. What were your thoughts on Mia Goth's performance?
I thought her performance was amazing. I mean, as I said before, I wasn't really familiar with her. But she starts out, the character is so, caring and kind and attentive. She doesn't seem like she's got like a bad bone in her body. Like, like she seems like a really, really good person.
Except
And
the geese.
yeah, and then there's that. And then I was like, well, that was kind of quirky and weird, but I was like, well, maybe that goose isn't from their farm and it's been getting the feed. Like, I'm trying to like logically think like
Just
why.
pissing her off the whole time.
Yeah, like I'm like just trying to like logically think, well, maybe at the time they were supposed to get rid of like random geese. Maybe it was causing issues with the cows, or like,
You're
I'm
trying
trying
to
to.
justify the killing of the
Yeah, I'm like, because I really wasn't really expecting her to be like this kind of serial killer person. So that was just a very, very slight hint of it. So I liked how it was such a slow build of this character. But then it's so sudden when things start to change for her. And that scarecrow scene, I kind of wondered, because there's a line the mother says that, you're doing things and you think no one knows, but people are watching. I kind of wondered if the mom saw her with that scarecrow in the middle of the field.
She could have. That mom was very creepy. She was just kind of like always around and always
Yeah.
there. And I think that really adds to the character of Pearl, just sort of like the oppressive nature of the mother. But you get all these great story beats throughout it. Like there's a whole sort of monologue by the mother, and when the mother, like, you get to see a moment where the mom's just crying in the middle of the night, right? Like Pearl comes in and looks, and her mom's just laying in bed crying. And then you get that great monologue where she's pissed off at Pearl, and she's basically like, "Look, I sacrificed my life as well. Like, you are a pain in my ass. I'm dealing with this, husband that I have to basically wipe his ass every single day. I don't want to be doing any of this shit." And, it's sort of like that resentment, right? It's basically like Pearl's got to be the same as her mom, because mother's unhappy with her life, and just sort of feels like, hey, Pearl, you're going to have to go through this like I had to go through this, sort of thing. Whereas Pearl is like, no, I want to get the fuck out of here. Like, she's got aspirations, right? She wants to be a dancer. And I love how they sort of changed what you expect. Like with that projectionist, when she first met that projectionist and he's like showing her the porn reels and stuff like that for the very first time,
Mhm.
my mind is like, okay, this guy's going to take advantage of her or something, and this is what's going to
Mhm.
cause her to snap or something. It was so refreshing that is not what happened at all. It was like this guy actually seemed like a good, decent dude. He wasn't trying to take advantage of her or anything. He wasn't going to like assault her in the projection room or anything like that. He just seemed like a genuinely good dude, and then slowly realizes, wait a minute, there's something a little wrong here when he shows up at her house, and then when she just goes nuts on him, man, that was just great. I mean, I'm impressed. As a director myself, I'm always impressed with the acting in films, and there's always one thing in any movie you watch where for 100% certainty that the performance is amazing, and that is when there is a long monologue and the director never cuts away. And that scene that you mentioned, Josh, that you feel towards the end, it's like her really long monologue when she's
Mhm.
talking to her stepsister. um, that goes on for like 6-7 minutes,
It's
and
long.
it's just Mia Goth basically describing everything about her life that has frustrated her, has made her upset, has sort of what she feels has made her the way she is, and made her question why she is the way she is, and how resentful she is of people, and things of that nature. And it never cuts away. Like at the very beginning, you get a couple reaction shots from Mitzi, but once the monologue really starts going, Ty West never cuts away.
No.
And that is the mark of a great performance, when the directors are like, you know what, this is so fucking good. Nobody's gonna care. There is no need to show a reaction shot, because
Mhm.
the audience is the reaction shot, right? How we're reacting to like the sheer devastation of this girl, and you feel bad for her, even though she's starting to go psycho and whatnot. She's doing these horrible things. Like, I felt genuinely horrible for this girl, and I was like, man. And when she like doesn't get the dancing gig, and just like the look on her face when they say no, fucking, she should win an award for this. This is like an
Yeah,
Academy Award winning
it's really
nomination.
great. Yeah. I was trying to figure out how to ask a question without spoiling X for Jenny. Um, so I'm gonna try to dance around this as best as I can. But how much, Matt, do you feel like the mom and dad in this movie mimic the characters, the older couple in X? As far as like, the mom talks about how I've sacrificed so much and I've given up all my hopes and my dreams for all these things. And then the older woman in X is kind of like she's kind of the same way. Like she just like a life of like broken dreams. Does that make sense to you at
Yeah,
all? Okay.
yeah.
Um
I think there's a poetry and a symmetry there. I think that's intentional. It's sort of like, in this movie, she comes to the realization by the end of the movie, like, this is just my lot in life. I'm not going to escape this farm, and I'm gonna have to. What they say, you're just gonna have to make the best of it. I think that's what her mom says. You're just gonna have to make the best with what you've got, and ultimately, Pearl sort of decides that. And I think the older couple in X, it's also very similar, but it's them like at an older point in their life,
mhm,
obviously,
right.
and it's like how you know none of us want to get old and look back on our lives and be like, I didn't fucking do what I wanted to do. I didn't
Right.
go visit that place I always wanted to visit. I didn't try to do this thing that I always wanted to do. You don't want to come have regrets later on in life.
Right.
And I think both of these movies are about regrets and aspirations.
Right.
So you have both in X, and in X, the main guy who's making the porn, right? It's like, we're going to make the greatest porn ever, and we're going to be rich and blah 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 and all that stuff. but then you have the older couple in X where a lot of regret there. There's a lot of regret that happened there. And in this, very, very similar, like Pearl has all these aspirations. She wants to do this thing, but there's a cold, hard reality of truth, right? Sometimes you just can't escape your lot in life. No matter how much you try, no matter what you do, you're just fucked. That's the hand that life dealt you. And so I think it's just, this film really nailed that sort of theme perfectly, and I absolutely love this. We always give letter grades here on the Outpost Unknown reviews. I'm going to give this an A. I won't go A plus, just because I feel like if I had any criticism of this movie at all, I think that, to your point, Josh, you said that the first 30 minutes are kind of slow. I wouldn't call them like slow. I would call some of the stuff probably unnecessary. Like, I feel like maybe about 10 minutes of this movie could have been chopped to make the pacing a little bit better. But once it gets going, it really rolls. So, but I'm going to give this an A. Like, I loved this movie. I think that this movie is better than X, in my opinion. But Jenny, what are your thoughts? Like, give us your final thoughts overall. Touch on anything that you want to discuss that we haven't maybe mentioned, and then what is your letter grade for this?
So I want to also add, I thought it was really interesting that I think they said the script was written in 2 weeks for this movie, and it was filmed back to back with X because of the pandemic. They're like, we're in New Zealand, there's no lockdown here, they've got closed borders. This is like the perfect opportunity to just keep going.
So same location and everything.
Yeah, they had to quarantine for 2 weeks before they could shoot. So Ti West wrote this during that 2 weeks of quarantine.
So I also know that that the main actress had a baby April of this year. Was she pregnant during the filming of this movie?
I don't know, because she's like Shia LaBeouf is her fiance, right?
Well, it's her ex-husband and current boyfriend.
Okay. Complicated relationship.
Yeah. But yeah, so I mean, since I haven't seen X and only knowing, like the kind of storyline, I can't really compare it to anything. So without comparing it to anything and just basing it solely on, just kind of how visually interesting it was, the colors, the cinematography, just the location they used I thought was really interesting. I mean, they barely filmed the movie more than 3 places. You've got like the church, the farm, this lake, the film like studio up above the movie theater. Like, there's not a lot of like locations, but I still thought it was like interesting enough that we didn't need to see more. So I'm going to go with an A minus.
Okay.
Is that all right? Since I don't know X.
Yeah. And I actually want to point out an interesting comment that you had after we left. Now, you are a woman. We were just a bunch of dudes, right? So there was actually a point in it where I had some sort of question about the alligator egg, right? And you actually mentioned, it's like, oh yeah, there's this whole thing about how she doesn't hate children, but she does not want to have children, right? Like, it makes her incredibly angry. and that was like a whole sort of aspect of that character that kind of went over my head, because I was just focusing on other stuff, and I was like, oh yeah, you're right, there is this whole other layer about kind of forced motherhood. In that whole monologue, there's a big thing about like how she was happy that she basically miscarried this baby that she didn't want with Howard and stuff like that. There's so many different layers to this, but okay, A minus. That's totally fair. Josh, what are your final thoughts and your letter rating?
Yeah. So I'm gonna give the movie a B plus. I'm giving Mia Goth an A for acting, and giving an A plus to her ability to smile and not blink for 2 full minutes. So
I want to get the Blu-ray of this just so I can get an audio commentary track with her and Ti West, and I want them to talk about that final shot of the movie, because it is wild.
I would just tell people to go for the story and the acting and stay for the 2 full minutes of not blinking. So.
It's great, and it's so uncomfortable too. It's like a close-up, and you're just like, okay, this is gonna end, right? No.
It doesn't. ever, and I feel like she's like as tears started to run down her eye, and I was just like, "Would you fucking blink? Blink! Do it!"
Yeah.
It's okay.
I
It's
also
okay.
felt that part was really relatable, like for like when people ask how you're doing, like during the pandemic and being alone and like just being stuck at home for literal years. Like sometimes you kind of feel like that. So I kind of felt like that part was really relatable because I kind of can't stand like in person if people ask me how things have been going at home. I'm like, really? Really? Like, because you know,
Yeah.
it's kind of psychotic what we're going through, and I thought she portrayed that in a way that really kind of reminded me of how crazy things are, and that her eye is just like pleading like for understanding and you know just wanting out so bad. I really liked that a lot. I related.
Yeah, yeah. It was a cool movie. Definitely go watch it. Go support it. There is a stinger afterwards. It's the sort of, I guess, teaser that they're making Maxine the third film in this trilogy. I assume it's just going to be a trilogy. I mean, maybe they'll just keep making more and more of these. I would not be disappointed if they did, if they continued this on. But yeah, super. We're all big fans of this, and I think Jeff was also a fan of this movie as well. So it was a good night, good company. That's our review, ladies and gentlemen. Go check out our X review, which I will link right here on this video. And thank you, Jenny, for coming on and being a part of Outpost Unknown. We'll have to have you on for more stuff in the future.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me, guys.